So our strategy for this campaign, which we just been calling the Apartheid-Free Community Campaign, was to get as many towns in Vermont as possible to adopt the Apartheid-Free Community Pledge, which is language that originated with the American Friends Service Committee. It's very available online. We'd been building this campaign for over a year leading up to March 4th, which is something called Town Meeting Day in Vermont, which is a really important time for local elections and for residents to vote on things like municipal budgets, ballot measures, articles, make municipal decisions about how towns are run. We pretty early on had done research into figuring out if Vermont has Israel bonds and figured out that that was not true, but did feel that there was space for divestment work. And so the Apartheid-Free Community Campaign was sort of like a gauge and a temperature check to figure out, to sort of like lay the groundwork and build some traction and momentum for divestment, longer term divestment campaigns. So we felt that slightly more than a year-long campaign was like a reachable goal and trying to get it in as many towns as possible. So I offer that up just for folks. A lot of folks here sound like they're kind of exploring what the options are and just starting out on things. We basically had like a statewide level campaign that was run through the Vermont Coalition for Palestinian Liberation. That's our statewide organizing body. And then different towns kind of developed their own campaigns out of that with like slightly different flavors and slightly like different issues and different tactics that they were using. And our goal overall was to popularize the Palestine movement and build support for divestment, like I said, at the state level, and also build the appetite for longer term BDS campaigns. And I would say like a key turning point was in Burlington, which is the largest town in Vermont. It's about 45,000 people. Organizers brought the AFC language to city council twice, 2 years in a row, both times with way over the amount of signatures they needed in petitioning to get AFC put on the ballot. And both times it was denied by the council. So at the second time, which was last year, that definitely was a moment where organizers were like, let's try to bring this to as many towns as possible and sort of shame Burlington for doing that. I would say, so in my home community, which is Brattleboro, like I said, in the South, and just for comparison's sake, population down here is like around 12,000. It's a pretty rural community compared to 45,000 in Burlington, around 8,000 in Montpelier, which is the capital city. And we built our campaign to really interweave with local issues, really seeking to make solidarity with Palestine a local issue, partially by tying US and Vermont spending on the genocide and Israeli weapons, and to the lack of social programs and infrastructure in Vermont, including like lack of housing, health and mental health care, and rebuilding from climate catastrophe. We've had 2 years of pretty devastating floods. But the biggest tactic we used was canvassing and going like deep canvassing style. We went door to door, we did leafleting, we developed outreach flyers and social media graphics that tied apartheid-free communities' work with education about apartheid and also other local items on the ballot, which we felt would be bad for our communities, like focusing on policing and carceral systems. And at the statewide level, one of the core organizers made a really rad video that was circulated on social media, again, talking about why AFC is relevant and important. So I would say like a lot of our tactics focused on political education and awareness raising and just really getting out in the street and being with people and talking to them about Palestine.
Thank you so much, Samia. That was really helpful too, because I think like the messaging piece about like making sure that you're connecting your campaign to very local issues so that people can like really localize Palestine and like really understand why this affects everybody in your guys' locale. I wanted to also ask Noelle, like back to you, your campaign also involved direct engagement with elected officials, including like city council meetings and like the mobilization that you talked about really consistently. What lessons did you learn about navigating local government and like applying pressure, and like what you felt was like the strongest tactic that got the county to take action?
Yeah, so as I kind of touched on briefly, what we recognized kind of at the city level, which transferred over to county, was just how dysfunctional our government bodies are. when we started going to county council meetings, we realized that some of the council members didn't even know that these bonds existed, and were unaware of who made the decision for them, that if they could vote on them or not. We did have 2 members of the council put forward a resolution in June for divestment, and due to Zionist pressure, ended up pulling it back. And so we continued to try to develop relationships with the council members that we felt were more aligned with us or were allies in some way. And then we're able to power map more specifically the investment advisory committee, and the executive is the one who's making the decisions. We showed up at the state of the county where the executive was speaking, and we're able to get him to make a statement saying that the county was not going to be moving away from bonds, which kind of solidified for us that he was opposing to us and in opposition, and someone that we needed to target and pressure. And so from there, we were able to kind of diversify our tactics a little bit, of continuing to go to county to give public comment, but then also having outside demonstrations as well, focusing specifically on the executive, like having sit-ins outside of his office or having demonstrations outside of his home. And so what we learned kind of throughout this whole process is that being able to effectively power map who are the key players in the decision-making process at the county level or even at the state level is what's going to be most effective in informing the decisions that you're making regarding tactics or the strategies that you want to use to push the divestment campaign forward. And then being able to apply pressure everywhere you can. We didn't really pick one way. It was just kind of any way that we were able to, whether it was trying to have private meetings with council members or continuing to show up in mass at the council meetings to show our presence is still here. And then while also trying to consistently meet with the county executive, who to this day has actually still refused to meet with our community.
Wow, okay, that's really good. Like helpful context to take up multiple tactics at the same time to build pressure. I want to bring it back to you, Samia, too. Like 5 out of 9 Vermont towns passed the ballot measure. What factors do you feel like contributed to success in those places, and like what lessons did you learn from areas where the measures failed? Because I feel like your guys' base building and messaging was really, really strong. So it'd be helpful to hear, your learned lessons from that aspect of the campaign.
For sure. Yeah, I think we found that in the towns that successfully adopted the article, there were 2 things that really seemed to make a difference. One being there was like a centralized coordinating committee that was doing the work of figuring out strategy. And 2, like on that coordinating committee, having local residents who are participating, who like really knew the town and had relationships. The towns that were less successful ultimately didn't have local people working on them, which posed issues on a lot of levels, like logistically related to coordination. And also, like in many places, like rural places, relationships are everything. And so it was really helpful for building trust and like getting out there in the community. And I also just want to say, and I saw some comments in the chat, like some town municipalities were definitely more favorable towards the initiative than others. So kind of some of this was a learning experience for us to figure out like what specifically was the resistance to apartheid-free getting on the ballot. So for example, in Brattleboro, our town select board stuck to the statutes, which say that if you get enough petitions or enough signatures on a petition, then it goes to the ballot. Whereas in Burlington, even though the organizers definitely got enough signatures and they were all verified, the council was against it based on a lot of things, but primarily Zionism. So it was definitely a good rubric for us to figure out like and sort of map and power map the state in terms of where the ground is soft for us to be doing longer term boycott and divestment stuff.